Well, good evening everyone. It's Sunday in time for a new episode of Record Collecting with a Quill. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite artists and one I've been thinking about doing an episode about for a long time. I'm talking about British guitarist, singer, songwriter called Terry Reid. The guy who is probably most famous for turning Led Zeppelin down, or turning down the vocalist spot in Led Zeppelin. And I think we will talk about that a little bit later because it's not entirely true. But he's a great singer, great guitarist, great songwriter. He's been productive since, or working since the mid 60s, but he hasn't been that productive in making albums. During all those years, he only released 6 albums, and the last one came in already in 1991. So, and those albums are, some of them are quite difficult to get a hold of, but they're all great albums. So I think we will talk a little bit about them, talk a little bit about Terry's history and what makes him great. As I said, he started out early. He was born in 1949 in England and left school at 15 and started playing more or less professionally. Played with a band called Peter J and the Jaywalkers, and they actually ended up on tour getting an opening slot for the Rolling Stones in 1966 when Terry was just 17 years old. So he was at it at a young age. Peter J and the Jaywalkers recorded one single, was sort of successful in England, but before they could do anything more, they disbanded. But Terry, somehow the word was out about him as being a great singer, and he got a deal with Mickey Most, a record producer and manager, was working with Peter Grant, future manager of Led Zeppelin, who will fit into the story a little bit later. And he got a solo deal in 1968 and recorded his first album, this one called Bang Bang, You're Terry Reid. A great first album, I must say. It's a little bit, you have the pop influences from the early 60s in the music, some of the tracks, but you also, music was changing in 1968, so you have a quite prominent guitars, and you have quite a prominent Hammond organ as well, but it's sort of song focused in a pop way, you could say. And there's some great tracks on this one, and Terry's singing fantastic. You have, I think probably the most famous ones are Tinker Tailor, you have Bang Bang, and you also have Without Expression, which is a song quite a few other artists have covered later on over the years. But his first album, Bang Bang, You're Terry Reid, great album to start out with. Then in 1969, he was productive in the earlier years. He released this one, and this was my introduction to Terry Reid. It's just called Terry Reid here in Europe, but in the United States they changed the title to Move Over for Terry Reid, but it's the same album, as I said. The covers are more or less the same, it's just a different title. And as I said, this is the one that I first heard. I think it was actually Bill Steer who introduced me to this one when we recorded the Firebird album in I don't know, 2002 or something. And this one, the pop influences from the first album is more or less gone, and it's a lot more in the vein of 1969. More guitars, more Hammond organ, and a great band, and some fantastic songs on this one. You have, well, I like all of them, but Rich Kid Blues, you have Speak Now or Forever Hold Your Peace, which was later covered by Cheap Trick. You have a good version of Highway 61. And if you want to hear Terry as a fantastic vocalist, you should listen to the ballad Stay With Me Baby, where he's singing his heart out. It's a fantastic performance by him. And I really like this cover as well, really cool cover. So he made those 2 albums in 68 and 69, but then he got in sort of a dispute with his manager about which way to take his career. His manager wanted him to do more or less ballads and sort of go that route, and Terry didn't want to go that route at all. So he was sort of banned from recording and sort of survived playing live for a couple of years. Mainly in America, and he was also really successful getting good opening slots. He opened for Rolling Stones in America and also for Cream on their last tour. And around that time, here comes the Led Zeppelin story. Jimmy Page had left Yardbirds and was looking to put together a new band, and asked Terry Reid if he would be interested in joining him and working on something new. But Terry had those two tours already booked, the Rolling Stones tour and the Cream tour of America. So Terry said, well, if you can sort of, whatever I'm losing, I'm not doing on those two tours, if you sort of pay me for that, and also call Keith Richards and say that I'm not able to do the tour because I'm going to work with you, then I might consider it. And Jimmy didn't take him up on that offer. Maybe he was afraid of Keith Richards, I don't know, or maybe it was too expensive. But he turned him down. But then Terry suggested this young guy, singer who had opened for Terry, called Robert Plant, that he would be something for Jimmy to check out. And also the drummer in the same band, a guy called John Bonham. So Terry was responsible for getting those two into Led Zeppelin. And when you say that he turned Led Zeppelin down, well, there weren't any Led Zeppelin when he got the offer. He got the offer to work with Jimmy Page, but it's still a good story, and one could wonder what would have happened if those two guys started working together. And around that time, it's also fairly sort of a story you hear quite often, is that he also turned Deep Purple down when Rod Evans left the band, and before they got Ian Gillan to sing for them. And it's not that story sort of, you read about it, but I haven't seen anyone commenting on it. So I don't know to what extent that is true or not, if it was just asked to audition, or if he was really asked to sing for them. But it's still sort of in his, in whenever you read about Terry Reid, you read about the guy who turned both Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple down. Anyway, I'm rambling. It took a couple of years, but then he got back on the scene again with one of his better albums, this one called River. And this one is sort of more rootsy. The sort of harder stuff with Hammond organs and stuff he did on the Terry Reid album is gone. And here you have David Lindley on slide guitar, and as I said, a lot more rootsy and sort of a little bit more unpolished in a way, which I really enjoy, and some fantastic songs on this one. Got great reviews when it was released in 1973, but was a commercial failure, unfortunately, because it deserves to be heard, and it's one of those albums that over time has gotten a lot more recognition than it got when it actually was released. Then sort of quiet again, and it took another 3 years for him to make a new album, when he released Seed of Memory. Came out in 1976. And this is sort of I would say this album is a sort of an updated version of River. Here you have Graham Nash from Hollies and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and all those incarnations produced this album. And he's also singing a lot of harmony vocals in this one. So as I said, it's a little bit more polished, but you have some of my favorite Terry Reid songs on this one. The title track is fantastic. Faith to Arise is a great one as well, and you have some great tracks at the end of it. The Frame, I think I'm getting nearsighted here, but a good one. But in true Terry Reid fashion, he signed with a new label here, ABC Records, and they went bankrupt the same week as this album was released. So once again he was facing bad luck. And the album it was released, but since there were no record label to promote it, it tanked, of course. Which is a shame, as I said, because this is, together with the River album and the Terry Reid album, are my favorite ones recorded by him. This one is the only one not available on streaming services, but I think you could find it on YouTube. Mandatory listen if you're into Terry Reid. Then, again in true fashion, he waited another 3 years, new record label, and he released this one, Rue Waves, which is I like all of his albums, but this is probably my least favorite one. It's still some great tracks, and his singing fantastic, but I have a little bit hard time with the mix on this one, but it's just my personal opinion. But there's still good songs here to be discovered, of course, because it's Terry Reid. Then the story is he sort of grew tired of the whole thing, and he didn't record anything in his own name during all of the 80s. He did session works and mainly as a singer, I believe, and wrote quite a lot of songs as well. But then in 1991, someone decided, or him himself as well, it was time to release a new album, and he released this one, The Driver, which at first I was a little bit skeptic about. Artists from the 60s and 70s doing records in the 90s or early 90s always tend to be a little bit, I don't know, sounds kind of weird, but I actually think this one works. I'm quite fond of this album. The production is a little bit 80s here and there, but since his vocals are so distinct and fantastic, it works. Yeah, I think he could sing the phone book and I would still enjoy it. And there's some great tracks on this one. The title track, The Driver, there's a good version of The Hollow of the Moon, and there's also a cover of Give Me Some Lovin', which was featured in the Days of Thunder movie with Tom Cruise around this time. And this is actually the last album he recorded. He hasn't recorded anything since, and it's well over 30 years, which is a shame. He released a couple of live albums, I believe, and some cover album or compilation albums. I have this one, The Hand Don't Fit the Glove, and there you have some of the earlier singles, and also the Terry Reid album. I believe it's an American compilation. Have this one called Super Lungs, the complete studio recordings, 66 to 69. There's a couple of singles as well, and you have the Bang Bang and Terry Reid album on this one, and some unreleased tracks as well, I believe, which is kind of cool. And then a couple of years, I mentioned this in a previous episode, The Other Side of River, with outtakes from the Fantastic River album, which is mandatory. And I have to get this one on vinyl as well, because there's some great alternate versions of songs from the River album. So you must get that one. Well, as for Terry, well, he's still productive in the playing live a lot. He plays quite a lot in California, I believe, and he regularly comes to the UK and plays live as well. So I hope I'll get a chance to see him. I think he's coming sometime this summer, so it would be great to see him live. I've seen some YouTube clips, and he still sings fantastic and plays a mean guitar as well. So hopefully I get to see him. And I think you should check his albums out if you haven't heard him. As I said, there's some fantastic stuff to be discovered on all of his albums. And I hope he gets a lot more recognition before it's too late. Anyway, let me know. Are you into Terry Reid? Have you heard his albums? Which are your favorite ones? And if you haven't heard him, give it a listen and comment what you think about it, because there's so much great stuff. And as I said, if I would suggest anything, start out with the Terry Reid album, the River album, or Seed of Memory. Those three are my favorite ones, but the other ones are good as well. Well, that's it for now. Make sure you follow us on social media. It's the QUILL Sweden. We have our new album out, Live New Bar Blue. It's streaming everywhere. It's out on CD, and vinyl is coming as well. Just stay in there, and we have some more news coming this week. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Next week, we're sort of celebrating. It's our 52nd episode. We've been doing this for a whole year, so I'll see if I can come up with something special for that episode. Well, time to, I don't know, just sit down and relax and listen to some more music. Thanks for watching. Cheers, and see you all again next week. Bye.